Yahoo Fantasy Auto Racing has completed week 34 in the Sprint Cup NASCAR season. The Texas Motor Speedway was the site of the AAA Texas 500 at the Texas Motor Speedway, the Great American Speedway in Fort Worth. The 1.5-mile cookie cutter oval was the host of a fantastic, wild event as the NASCAR season comes to a close. And we have a new points leader when all was said and done. Your top five from the event. Denny Hamlin picks it up and takes the win when it counts the most. Taking first place over Matt Kenseth, followed by Mark Martin in third, Joey Logano in fourth, and Greg Biffle in fifth. As we look at how they got to that top five, just going through the event, talking about your race notes. Elliott Sadler actually started on the pole for this event. He would wind up being a non-factor rather early in the race. Greg Biffle took the lead on lap 2, and him and Joey Logano would pretty much dominate the event. They wound up leading the majority of the laps, throwing some laps led there by Mark Martin and a couple of other drivers who reached the front for a lap or two here and there, but Greg Biffle and Joey Logano were certainly the class of the field from start to finish, and it showed by getting top 5 finishes when all was said and done. Your first caution of the day came out on lap 12 as Joe Nemechek, trying to run the event. He had a sponsor this week. He wound up smoking and bringing out the caution. Certainly a disappointing bounce back from his fairly decent run at Talladega. The leaders went to pit road on lap 13 under the yellow, and Jimmy Johnson's day would take a dramatic turn right off the bat. The team had pit road issues all day long. It started with their first pit stop where a tire was actually contacted by Paul Menard and knocked into the infield. Normally, a tire rolling across pit road would be a penalty, but because it was basically knocked across the pit lane by another car, NASCAR did not issue a penalty. But Johnson's woes on pit road would be the story of the evening. The next major event, lap 55, Ryan Newman wound up going to pit road to take 4 tires, kind of an unscheduled pit stop, and his seatbelts actually came undone in the car as well, so he had to come in and get that corrected, and he had to pick up tires as well. Lap 58 was the third caution of the event. Sam Hornish Jr. winds up hitting the wall. He had a pretty memorable race last year in this event, being the driver who took out Jimmy Johnson in the 2009 running of this race, and he did not have a very good opening to this event this year either. Next major event, under pit stops from that yellow flag, Kevin Harvick's team chose 4 tires, while many drivers wound up taking 2, and 2 tires had actually proven to be pretty valuable instead of 4 as far as track position was concerned up to that point. Kevin Harvick and team owner Richard Childress were both rather displeased with the decision by the crew chief to go ahead and take 4 because it did put Kevin pretty far back in the standings. However, they wound up having a pretty long green flag run there, and the pit strategy wound up paying off as Harvick had a much stronger car late in that run. So Kevin Harvick and his team owner wound up being on the losing end of that gamble, and the car actually wound up moving forward. Next major event, lap 132. Martin Truex began his miserable day. He wound up bringing out the first of 3 cautions he brought out himself in the event. He spun through the infield grass and got loose off of turn 4, basically, putting him into the infield grass and hitting the wall. Then we had the 5th yellow flag, this one also for Martin Truex Jr. He blew a right front tire and tore up the car pretty bad. And then under caution, Jimmy Johnson wound up having yet another poor stop. This would continue throughout the day up until a major turning point that we're going to get to in just a moment. Jimmy Johnson's crew had 7 pit stops, and 4 of those they lost ground for Johnson, which is highly uncharacteristic of this 4-time championship pit crew. What would eventually happen later in the race, due to other circumstances, Jimmy Johnson's pit crew wound up being benched for Jeff Gordon's pit crew, who became available because of a later incident in the race. We'll get to that. The drama wound up coming about the midway point in the race. We get to the 150s, the lap 150 range. Kyle Busch wound up spinning out on lap 159, bringing out a caution. He didn't hit anybody, despite spinning in the middle of the pack, basically. Didn't hit the wall, didn't hit any other cars, didn't really cause a whole lot of damage to his vehicle. He did flat spot his tires, so he came in for tires. But to get back off pit road in time, he had to speed down pit road. NASCAR didn't like that. They penalized him a lap because that is against the rules. Kyle Busch was furious on the radio about getting the 1-lap penalty, came back down pit road, and while serving his 1-lap penalty, he flipped off a NASCAR official. This was caught on camera by ESPN. ESPN had to apologize for the incident, for the unsportsmanlike conduct, as NASCAR deemed it. NASCAR basically penalized him 2 additional laps, so Kyle Busch had to come back in and serve another 2-lap penalty. He wound up having it out with his own crew chief on the radio. Crew chief basically reamed him for costing the team the race, and behaving so poorly that the team wound up suffering for Kyle Busch's personal issues. So Kyle Busch and his team had a falling out during the event. Kyle would wind up being a non-factor for the rest of the race, despite having a pretty fast car. Lap 191, Martin Truex brought out his 3rd personal caution of the race. That was the 7th caution of the event. But in a bizarre incident that took place after and away from the Truex wreck, Jeff Gordon and Jeff Burton totaled their race cars in turn 2, the result of which was both drivers winding up out of the race. Now, both drivers have different stories about what happened, but essentially Jeff Burton takes blame for the fact that he raced Jeff Gordon a little rough. Coming to the caution, Jeff Gordon was displeased with the way Burton was racing him and taking up more track than he needed and basically being a hazard, as Jeff Gordon saw it. Gordon went to confront car to car with Jeff Burton in turn 2 when the caution came out, and Jeff Burton wound up hooking the rear end of Gordon and plowing both cars into the wall. This upset Gordon to the point where Gordon refused an ambulance ride in his own ambulance, walked across the racetrack, and started shoving Jeff Burton on the backstretch. The crowd went crazy. They were totally into this as fisticuffs broke out on the backstretch, and the two had to have a very awkward shared ambulance ride back to the infield care center. Jeff Burton did eventually take the blame for the incident, saying that it was a mistake on his part, while Jeff Gordon didn't seem like he was willing to accept the apology. Both drivers wound up finishing outside the top 35 as a result of the wreck. Later on in the race, as Greg Biffle and Joey Logano continued to dominate, we would get really close to the end of the race before a whole lot else would happen. Kevin Harvick actually smacked the wall. He would wind up losing some ground on pit road, but would actually use pit strategy to get back into it. Jimmy Johnson, meanwhile, using Jeff Gordon's pit crew, who became available because Gordon dropping out of the race, wound up gaining spots in their next 2 pit stops. Johnson, though, would wind up losing ground to both Harvick and Hamlin when all was said and done. The 9th caution of the race was lap 328 as Patrick Carpentier in the number 26 car brought out a caution, setting up a dash to the finish. This allowed Kevin Harvick to come to pit road and take 4 tires and fix the fenders a little bit. And then on the restart, the green flag came out with Denny Hamlin and Matt Kenseth side by side for the lead. Greg Biffle right behind them in row 2. Had shifting issues. This bogged down Jimmy Johnson on the high lane. He was unable to get around Greg Biffle and allowed Kevin Harvick to actually dash by Johnson. A mad dash ensued for the 10th place spot as Johnson had to hold off and pass a lot of cars to try to stay in that top 10, while Harvick was able to put a couple of cars between him and Johnson. Meanwhile, up at the front, Denny Hamlin actually lost the lead momentarily coming out of turn 2 with 2 laps to go to Matt Kenseth, who out of nowhere showed that he had a dominant race car and almost captured the lead. He actually took the lead coming off of 2 and then brushed the wall. Hamlin had to swerve down low on the backstretch to avoid hitting Kenseth and then capture the lead back as Mark Martin looked on from 3rd. But from that point on, Hamlin was able to lead the rest of the way. So Denny Hamlin winds up picking up the victory. And as we look at the point standings going with just 2 races left, Denny Hamlin now holds a 33-point lead over Jimmy Johnson. This is the first time in Jimmy Johnson's 5 previous seasons that Johnson is not leading the points, leaving the Texas Motor Speedway. Hamlin with a 33-point lead, and then a 59-point lead on Kevin Harvick. Harvick gained ground on Jimmy Johnson, but then lost ground overall because of Denny Hamlin winning. 4th in points now, Carl Edwards, who's 317 points out. Interesting to note that 3rd through 10th in the points are separated by just 80 points. So there's a ton of points and a ton of positions left to be grabbed by the rest of the chasers. Looking at the Tucson Racing League, that's what you're here for. The Yahoo Fantasy Auto Racing Tucson Racing Fantasy results. Your winner this week, and for the 8th time and league leader this season in wins, the Wall Always Wins came home first. One of 3 teams to start. Denny Hamlin in Group A also had 7th place Clint Boyer, 10th place Paul Menard, so 3 in the top 10, and then 16th place Jamie McMurray. 2nd this week, and finishing with 286 points, was Hulk Smash. Hulk Smash wound up gaining 10 points on points leader High, Wide, and Handsome with the 2nd place finish. Starting 1st place Denny Hamlin, 4th place Joey Logano, the only team to start Joey this week, and 10th place Paul Menard, coupled with Jeff Burton's disappointing 36th place finish. 3rd this week, 10 points behind Hulk Smash, was league leader High, Wide, and Handsome. Starting the race winner Denny Hamlin, 2 drivers in the top 20, Casey Kane 13th and David Rudiman in 15th, and then Regan Smith out of Group C was a disappointing 22nd. 4th this week goes to Stuart Blow's Kane Rules. Kane Rules has actually had a really good run to close out the season. Had the disappointing Kurt Busch 24th in Group A, but then 3 drivers in the top 15. 6th place Kevin Harvick, 15th place David Rudiman, and 10th place Paul Menard. 5th this week, and also continuing a strong run in the standings, Team Edwards the driver, finishing with 251 points. Had all 4 drivers in the top 10. David Reagan was the only top 10 driver, finishing 8th, the only team to start David Reagan this week. But then 15th place David Rudiman, 18th place Sam Hornish, and 19th place Carl Edwards. 6th this week, and losing a lot of ground, not only to the championship leader and to 2nd place, but also giving up a lot of ground to 4th place, was Lightning McQueen, finishing with just 242 points. Had 1 driver in the top 10, that was Jimmy Johnson in 9th. Then had Jamie McMurray 16th, Sam Hornish 18th, and Dale Earnhardt Jr., a disappointing non-factor, finishing 25th. And the only other driver to score this week was Greek Thunder. Greek Thunder had 1 driver in the top 15. That was Clint Boyer in 7th. Then had Ryan Newman in 20th, Scott Speed in 27th, and Jeff Gordon in 37th. And rounding out the field, 8th and 9th this week was a tie. Whoa, a left turn, and oh no, a blowout. Once again, did not start drivers that could earn points, so they finished with zeros. In the overall standings, as we have 2 races remaining, High, Wide, and Handsome now has 9,172 points and holds a 152-point lead over Hulk Smash. Hulk will need to gain 76 points per race in the next 2 races to close that gap. It's going to be a tall order, but can certainly be done. 3rd in the standings, Lightning McQueen, 345 points out of 1st. Would have to gain 173 points per race in the next 2 races to close that gap. Likely not going to happen, but in the battle for 2nd, Lightning McQueen still has a shot. 193 points out of 2nd place, would need to make up 97 points per race in the final 2 races. 4th in the standings, the Wall Always Wins. 473 points out of 1st place, so probably won't win, barring a miracle. But 128 points out of 3rd, so still has a definite shot at 3rd place. Would need to make up 64 points a race in the final 2 races to get that done. And then we had a change for 5th place as Team Edwards, the driver, continues their wave of success while Greek Thunder continues their tumble in the standings. Team Edwards now sits 5th overall, 865 points out of 1st place. And 6th overall in the standings, Greek Thunder is now 48 points behind Team Edwards. So we have a dogfight with 2 races to go between these 2 teams. And then rounding out the field, whoa, a left turn, oh no, a blowout, and Stewart Sucks, Kane Rules. Next week, week 35, it's another Sunday afternoon event, the Cobalt Tools 500 from the 1 Mile Phoenix International Raceway. The pool will lock it on Friday at 3 in the morning, so you'll need to have your driver set by Friday early morning, and your starters are going to lock Sunday at 1 o'clock p.m. So we'll hope to see you back next Monday with 2 races remaining in the NASCAR Sprint Cup season and the Yahoo Fantasy Auto Racing Tucson Racing League.